What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the CBB Yapper. We've had a pretty eventful start to the week this week in college basketball, so we have a lot to talk about. On today's episode, I'm going to go over some of the games that we discussed on Sunday's episode for games to watch this week, as well as some of the ones that we couldn't get to. Then I'll go over some of the biggest upsets that happened from last night, as there were a couple that we need to talk about. And then we'll end it with some of the games to watch in this absolutely loaded upcoming weekend of college basketball here. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first game that I wanted to talk about here today was one that we could not get to on Sunday's episode just because I had recorded that episode before this game took place so I could get some eyes on it. But that was Florida versus Bama. I had said on Thursday's episode that I was really rooting for Florida to come away with a W here, and that's really what happened. They kind of just dog walked Alabama the entire time. But it was a really fun game to watch, especially in the first half. It was really back and forth and just a very high-paced and high-scoring game, especially hearing both of the coaches and Golden and Oates go back and forth against each other throughout the week. It was just really fun to kind of see how this matchup played out. But I thought it was just a really impressive win for Florida yet again. I've been pounding the table on this Florida team all year. I really do think that they are one of the elite teams in the nation and certainly playing like a top 15 team in the nation right now. Condon and Houck pretty much just dominated on offense the entire night for them, and it was a really impressive game for them. But I really thought that Boogie Flan's night was really impressive. He had 8 steals on defense, which especially for a point guard who's not really looked at for his defense, 8 steals in one night is just incredible for anyone, let alone a smaller point guard. So I thought it was a really impressive game for him, but just an all-around impressive win for the Gators here. They're playing as well as anyone right now. Like I mentioned, I personally think that they are a top 12 team right now. But yeah, they're just going to continue to trend up here, and I could very easily see them making another repeat run to the Final Four. I don't necessarily know if they'll get there, but I certainly think that they're at least an Elite 8 team right now. As for Bama, they just really aren't doing anything that moves me right now. Even with the addition of Bediako, I think that that's made them a better team, and it's helped certainly, especially on defense, but I still just don't think that they're near an elite team. It's still really hard to kind of give a full analysis on Bama right now with the Bediako situation still up in the air, and really not a lot of clarity has come on that situation yet. So again, I'm still going to kind of try and stay away from giving them a full analysis, but they're still a very good team. They should be there in March at least, but I just really don't see them going much further than the first round, and honestly is probably a team that I'm going to have as an upset watch in the first round of March Madness, just because I just think there's too many holes on this team, and their lack of defense is just really a problem. They can give up 90 to pretty much anyone on any given night, and that's just not going to be a recipe for success in March. The other game that I had pointed out on Sunday that we were not able to get into just due to the timing there was Illinois and Nebraska. This was a game that I think most people probably had circled before the week started, but I was just really excited to get some eyes on this game. These are just two teams who have been playing pretty much as good as anyone, definitely two top 10 teams in the nation as of right now, and it certainly didn't disappoint. It wasn't necessarily the most competitive game throughout, but it was a really fun and fairly back and forth game. It just looked like Illinois kind of had a firm grasp on this game for majority of it at least, but I've been high on both these teams all year, and this game didn't really change my mind on either of them other than maybe give me a little bit more confidence in Illinois. But I think this Illinois team is just going a little bit under the radar. I haven't personally talked about them too extensively. I know I've talked about them highly. When I have brought them up, I have said that they're a very good team, and analytically, they look like one of the best teams in the nation, but I still think that I have not even been giving them justice as well. They are just a really good team, and Wagler is playing as good as anyone in the nation right now. He had another really good game on Sunday, but over their last 5 games, he's averaging 24.4 points per game on 53.8% from the field and 50% from 3. I mean, that's just an incredibly efficient rate for a freshman. I mean, not only a freshman, any guard, to be honest, anyone who's shooting that high of a clip and that efficient of a clip while putting in that many points per game is just incredible. And I'm really excited to see how this kid continues to grow, and I'm really excited to see him in March Madness as well. But yeah, with him, the sky's the limit for this Illinois team. They really found a good one in him. I know he was a bottom like 150 recruit or something like that. So man, they really found a diamond in the rough with Wagler here. But yeah, I think Nebraska is also still a very good team. This loss doesn't change that for me, but they just ran into the buzzsaw that is Illinois right now. Illinois is just playing as good as anyone right now, and they could beat anybody on any given night. And this is a team that I'm going to have to start paying attention to a little bit more here, because this is another team that I could really see making a Final Four run and potentially being a national championship contender by March. I just really do think that this team has a lot of the pieces to be there at the end. The next game that I had pointed out was that McNeese State versus FS Austin game. This was a game that I really only pointed out to get an eye on the Southland Conference. I have watched McNeese State once this year and didn't get a chance to watch SF Austin at any other point throughout the year. So I wanted to get a good look at the Southland Conference and see who's most likely going to be making the tournament from that conference. I was hoping for a competitive game, but for the most part, it just really wasn't. SF Austin just jumped out right away to a pretty sizable lead in the first half, and McNeese did battle back in the second half a little bit, but immediately when they brought it back within 2, I think, SF Austin immediately pushed the lead back out and just kind of dominated for the rest of the game again. I thought it was a really impressive game for SF Austin, not watching them very much throughout the year, and completely just dominating, really, McNeese State for majority of that game was really impressive for me, seeing as McNeese is seemingly the only competition that they have in the Southland Conference out there. So I thought it was a really impressive game for them. However, the first matchup, McNeese did take at home by 2. So this was more of a get-back game for SF Austin and to tie up the lead in the Southland Conference, as McNeese did hold a slight edge over them. But yeah, I just think that these two are going to be obviously the two teams to watch in the Southland Conference by the end of the year. I think it'll be them most likely in the Southland Conference Championship at the end of the year. So that would be a good game to get an eye on just to see what they have right before March. But yeah, it should be fun to see how this conference shapes up. These two are probably going to be at the top for the remainder of the year. So it was just cool to see a preview of what I believe is going to be the Southland Conference Championship this early in the year. The other game that I had pointed out on that night was the Kansas and Texas Tech game, and boy, did that one deliver. Peterson finally plays a full game, and it was everything that we had hoped for and more. Not only was the game good throughout, Texas Tech did kind of pull off to a little bit of a lead in the second half. I think they went up by double digits at one point and looked like they were about to run away with it, but then Kansas just stormed back completely on the backs of Darren Peterson and just let him carry them to a W in Lubbock that night. Just 2 absolutely stone-cold shots at the end of the game from Peterson sealed that one for him, but this has been a team that I've been talking about highly on all year. If Peterson is healthy, this Kansas team, I really think, could cut down the nets in April. They just have talent aside from him, but with him, they have one of, if not the best player in the nation. I think just as of right now, you have to give that nod to Cam Boozer just because of how consistent he's been and playing the entire year. But in terms of talent, I think Darren Peterson absolutely is at least in that conversation for most talented players in the nation right now as a freshman. But they're really hitting their stride right now. They have been playing some great ball here in the last 2 weeks, and I definitely think that they're a top 10 team in the nation right now, especially with Peterson healthy. Texas Tech, on the other hand, they've been sliding here a little bit recently, and they're going to need to figure it out, but they have a really big opportunity to bounce back here with 4 really bad Big 12 teams in a row. So I think that they're going to end up right back up in the top 15 here in a couple weeks, but with JT Toppin, the sky's the limit for them. They can compete with anybody. He is one of the best players in the nation right now and would be getting a lot more love if this freshman class was not as good as it is. Up next, I, of course, had pointed out my Duke Blue Devils versus Boston College as a game to watch as well. It looked like Duke was just going to run Boston College out of the gym right away and never look back. However, they did look back. The offense just really became almost non-existent in the second half. They put up 25 points in the last 20 minutes of the game, which is just really bad, especially against a very bad Boston College team. Definitely not what I was looking for as a Duke fan going into this huge game on Saturday. We need to be playing at our best to be able to take down this Tar Heel team who is playing much better recently. I still think that we're a much better team than UNC, but if we don't play up to standard or do not play how we should, we will definitely lose that game because it is a rivalry game. And like I said, UNC is playing much better as of recently. So this is certainly not a game that they can be sleepwalking into, which is kind of what it felt like they were doing in the second half. Felt like they thought that they did enough in the first half to be able to just walk through it and focus on Saturday, but they were able to just because of this Boston College team being that bad. If this was a better team, they could have very easily lost this one, and we would be looking at Duke in a very different light right now. Obviously, I think this just had to do more with them looking ahead to Saturday. I don't think that this is really reflective of how good this Duke team is. They still ended up winning by 18, but it should have been closer to 30, in my opinion. Duke doesn't have many problems right now, but their offensive droughts can certainly be one that you can point at. I mean, just putting up 25 points in the second half against a very bad Boston College team is just very unimpressive and something that I'm really getting a little bit sour on. I'm still very high on this Duke team. I still think that they have a very good opportunity to cut down the nets in April. Just need to shore some things up here a little bit, especially on the offensive end, and cannot afford to drop one in Chapel Hill on Saturday. And to start the trio of games that I had pointed out on Wednesday night's slate, we'll start with Villanova and Seton Hall. This is one thing that I am going to toot my own horn on. Seton Hall is just one thing that I got right, and they are just not a good team. I had personally put them as the fourth best team in the Big East, and now I'm not even sure if I can say that. I personally think that they're probably closer to the 6 range, probably hanging around teams like Butler. But yeah, this was just another really tough watch, especially offensively for Seton Hall. They shot 12% from deep as a team again, which is just absolutely abysmal. And their offensive worries are really, really starting to show here. I do not think that this is a tournament team. I personally think that they are pretty solidly outside of the tournament field right now just due to how poorly they've been playing. But yeah, typically teams get better as the season goes on. They are just on the opposite side of that trend. They played very well to start the season and now have just fell flat on their face. I understand that Holloway is a defensive coach, but I don't know how you watch that offense and don't realize that you need to do something. I mean, it just looks like they are just praying for buckets to come on offense. He really has to develop some way to get these dudes in scoring opportunities because they are not able to get it themselves. This is a team that I'm just going to continue to be low on. I personally think that they are maybe an NIT team at this point. They'll probably just make it just based on their name alone and due to them starting out the season pretty well. But yeah, this is just a team that I am all the way out on. I do not think that they have any shot of making the tournament unless they win the Big East tournament, which, again, I don't think they have any shot of doing. I don't think that they can compete with teams like St. John's, UConn, or Villanova. And clearly couldn't compete with Villanova on this night. Villanova, on the other hand, I think they are a team that is really just kind of getting disrespected, especially in the AP polls. They are really rewarding all these SEC teams for losing in their conference, which I just think is just kind of stupid. They're just rewarding them for beating each other up in that conference. I get it. They're a much better conference than the Big East, but I do think other teams deserve a little more love for winning than the SEC teams deserve for losing. But nonetheless, Villanova is playing very well right now. I've talked very highly on their backcourt with Lindsay and Lewis. They are two of the best guards in the nation and one of the best backcourts in the nation. So I think that they can definitely make some noise here in March. And if they're a lower seed, I'll tell you what, I saw them matched up against Duke in the second round as an 8 seed in one of the brackets, and that is not something that I would be looking forward to. I do think that Duke is obviously a much more talented team than Nova, but Nova is definitely a team that could give Dukes a run for their money just due to their guards and their backcourt. I really think that they are a good team and could give a lot of these elite teams some problems. I don't necessarily think that they are an elite team, but they are definitely very good, and if you do not show up to play, they can definitely beat you by a decent amount. The other game that I had pointed out around the same time slot, so I did have to put both of these games up on separate TVs and break my neck a little bit looking back and forth between them, but Texas A&M and Alabama. This was just a really fun game throughout the entirety. I mean, over 90 points scored in both halves just set us up for an electric, high-paced game. Both teams just pushed the crap out of the ball and shot insane clips. They combined for 79, yes, 79 total three attempts, which is just insane. I honestly do not think I have ever seen that in my 20 years of watching college basketball, and was just one of the games that I think will probably stick with me till I die, because that was just such a different game than I've ever experienced in my life. But I think my expectations for the Aggies were just a little bit high. I think I put a little too much stock in their record and not enough stock in their actual resume. They really didn't have much talented teams that they had played before this game, so that is why their record was a little over bloviated. But I do think that they proved that they can hang with these teams at the very least. I think my expectations just needed to be tempered on them a little bit. I don't think that they're necessarily a Sweet 16 team, but they're certainly a team that should be able to win a game in March. They might drop two in a row here, though, and I know after I spoke a little highly of them on Sunday, might be a little hypocritical for me to say, but I do think that they will lose to Florida again on Saturday, just because I do think Florida is a very good team and playing as good as anyone right now. So I don't think that that's necessarily going to be something to harp on Texas A&M for, but losing two games in a row after I talked so highly of them just isn't going to necessarily be a great look. But I do think that this is definitely a team that can win a game in March. But Bama, again, similar to what I said earlier, this is just a team that I really just don't want to discuss until this Bediako situation is figured out. It looks like we should get some clarity on that here in the next couple of days, but yeah, I just really don't want to give them a full analysis until their roster is finalized. Like I said, adding Bediako has really improved their defense, although it didn't show that night for sure. But yeah, I think that they definitely have the offensive firepower to hang with anyone. It's just defensively they have so many holes, but with Bediako, those holes definitely are filled a little bit more. The last game that I had pointed out on Sunday's episode also took place on Wednesday night, and that was Utah State versus New Mexico. This was kind of similar to the McNeese and SF Austin game that I had pointed out. I just really wanted to get a look at two teams at the top of their conference and was really looking forward to a close and competitive game out in the Mountain West, but Utah State just had other plans on this night. They just really had a solid game all around from everyone. It seemed like everybody contributed in some way. But for New Mexico, it was just a really bad showing from pretty much everyone. They shot 3 of 13 from deep, which is just not going to be a winning recipe on pretty much any night. And they didn't really shoot much better from the field either. So just a really bad loss for New Mexico, and a really big one as well, losing this one at home to Utah State, dropped them to third in their conference, so it's going to be a little bit of an uphill battle here. Obviously, they still have the Mountain West Conference tournament, so they're not necessarily out, but certainly hurts their opportunity to get an at-large bid. But this is just going to be something that we need to continue to watch out there. There's 3 teams out in the Mountain West that are kind of sitting at the top of the conference right now, with Utah State, New Mexico, and then also San Diego State as well. So just another team that we're going to have to watch in San Diego State. San Diego State is scheduled to play both of these teams, Utah State and New Mexico, here in a couple weeks. So we'll have to tune back in for those and just keep an eye on how this Mountain West Conference is shaping up here. Of course, with all the other games that I had pointed out on Wednesday night's slate, I did not get a chance to get my eyes on too many of the other games, at least not for their entirety, but was really shocked to look at my phone last night and see how many upsets we had, and not only just upsets, but just big upsets. I mean, most of these upsets were just major and not teams that I would expect to lose to the type of teams that they lost to. But starting with BYU, they're really, really sliding hard here. They dropped 3 games in a row. I get 2 of them were to 2 of the best teams in the nation in Kansas and Arizona. But then they went and dropped another one to the Oklahoma State Cowboys last night. Anthony Roy is a certified stud and an absolute baller. He's not someone that we've talked about much recently on this show, but he is someone that can absolutely torch you on any given night. And that's exactly what he did to BYU last night. He poured in 30 points on 15 shots and propelled the Cowboys to their biggest win of the season. DeBonsa looked like he had a really incredible night as well. I obviously only got to look at the score sheet here, but he poured in 36 as well. Aside from him, though, it didn't look like they got much else. Excuse me. Aside from him, Saunders, and Wright, it didn't look like they got much else from anyone else. This has been a really big problem that I've pointed out for BYU recently. They're just not getting enough production out of their role players. Their top three are as good as anybody in the nation, but after that, they're just really lackluster and not getting much production from their role players. If they want to make a deep run in March and potentially cut down the nets like they've talked about, they're going to need to get more production out of their role players, and they're really going to need to start buying in on defense. I mean, they gave up 90 plus to a Oklahoma State team that is not very good. I get Anthony Roy is a stud, but other than that, they really do not have much on that Oklahoma State team, and just not a very excusable loss for BYU, and I'm sure their fans are not really happy with how the season is starting to turn around here. Usually this is when you want to start playing your best ball, and it looks like BYU has taken a pretty significant step back here. I certainly think that they're going to bounce back. They have one of the best players in the nation in DeBonsa, so I really do think that they're a very good team and will be a Sweet 16 team, but right now they really need to look in the mirror and figure some things out here before we get into March. The last upset that I wanted to talk about from last night's slate was that Michigan State loss to Minnesota. This is another team in Michigan State that has just really had a pretty rough week here. First, they lost to their rivals last weekend on Saturday. Again, that's Michigan. They're one of the best teams in the nation, so not really something to harp on there. But then they go and drop another one to a weak Minnesota Golden Gophers team. And this is something that I'm sure the Sparty faithful are not very happy about. But I wouldn't hit the panic button on this team just yet. They're still a very talented team, and with Fears, I still think that they could, at the very least, make the Elite Eight. But he has just been playing some really weird basketball recently. It's almost reminding me of Grayson Allen and his situation where he was just a couple games where he just did downright dirty stuff for no reason. But yeah, another game where Fears just had multiple plays where you just look at and you're like, what are you doing, dude? Like, just straight dirty stuff, kicking people, tripping people, elbowing people in the face off rebounds, like just some really weird stuff going on here. And you're just way too good of a player to be doing this kind of stuff, especially with how important you are to your team. It's just selfish. Like, if you get kicked out of a game in March because of doing this kind of crap, you're going to cost your team a run at potentially being a national champion. Like, this kind of stuff has to get nicked in the butt right now, and I'm sure Izzo is going to do that, but yeah, they really got to nip this right now and just get it out the way, get him to stop doing this because they are really going to need him to make a deep run in March, and honestly, the Big Ten may be issuing a suspension here very shortly just based on his antics recently. You just can't have that kind of stuff in the game of college basketball. And if you don't do anything about it, more people are going to do it because they think they can get away with it. So I'd like to see them kind of make an example of him, maybe just give him a one-game suspension or something like that, just to kind of show that they're not going to tolerate this kind of crap. But yeah, just a really, really, really weird past 2 games from Fears. I'm not sure if this is how he's been all year. I've watched them multiple times. Against Duke, it didn't seem like he was dirty. He did the F-Cam Boozer chant thing and hyping the crowd up for that, which I thought was kind of a little odd. But yeah, I hadn't seen this kind of dirty stuff coming from him at least. But perhaps he has been like this all year. Maybe other people have seen this type of stuff from him throughout the year. And if you have, I'd like to know about it. Or if you have any plays that you can point to that I can go and look at, I'd love to see them. But yeah, I don't know what got into him recently here, but it just seems like he really needs to figure out whatever issues he's going through right now. And moving on from some of those huge upsets that we saw take place last night, I wanted to point out some more games to watch between now and Sunday's episode. Starting on Friday night, we have UConn versus St. John's. This is a game that I am really excited for and one of the favorite games of the week for myself. Obviously not the favorite due to another game that's going to be talked about here very shortly, but I have just been really high on this St. John's team pretty much the entire year, and I'm really anxious to see them get a chance to prove it against a really good UConn team. It'll also be fun to see the two coaches, Patino and Hurley, go back and forth against each other as well. They're two of the best coaches in the sport, so it'll just be really cool to see those mind games between each other. But UConn has been pretty dominant the entire year. They've pretty much sleptwalked through the entire Big East. And St. John's has had a really tough start to the season, but they are playing some really good ball here, especially in the last month. And I really think that they're a top 20 team at the moment. So, yeah, this is just a game that I think everyone should be circling, especially since it's really the only good game on that Friday night slate. But, yeah, two of the top three teams facing off in the Big East. Yeah, sign me up for that one. Moving on, this is the matchup that pretty much everyone has been waiting for, and I would assume that every college basketball fan will be tuning in for. But it's the greatest rivalry in sports with Duke versus UNC, and that's going to take place in Chapel Hill this weekend at 6:30 on Saturday. As a Duke fan, I am really nervous for this one. I'm not going to lie. The Blue Devils are arguably the second best team in the nation. I don't really think that that's too arguable right now between them and Michigan. I think those are just two of the top three teams in the nation behind Arizona right now. But UNC has been playing at a very high level recently and playing some very good ball as well. So I'm really nervous for this one. Not necessarily excited for it, but excited to see some good ball at least. Personally, I do think Duke should win this game by double digits, but it's certainly not going to be easy. I just think that this UNC team does not match up well against this Duke team that has a lot of length and guards that can attack and get to the rim as well as shoot it from deep. So it's just going to be a really tough guard for Trimble and Dixon. But UNC tends to struggle against good scoring guards, and Duke has at least one good scoring guard, and hoping that Caleb Foster can be another piece, especially offensively for Duke on that night. But yeah, I'm really going to be looking at Caleb Foster and Isaiah Evans in this one. They really need to show out for Duke to win this one in a convincing manner. But if Duke is going to win this one, they're going to need to get at least 15 plus from one of them. I think that's just going to be one recipe for success for Duke. Getting one of their guards to get at least 15 plus will be huge for them, and Boozer will just need to be Boozer. If those things happen, I think this Duke team should win pretty convincingly. But if UNC wants a chance to win this one, they're going to need Caleb Wilson to look like the best player on the floor. I mean, I think they're going to need to have a really dominant game from him, and he's going to have to go for 20 plus. Vasar has been a really good addition for them as well, so I think they're going to need a big game from him, but they're going to need a really, really big game from Caleb Wilson to etch his name in North Carolina history here, and they're going to need to play some high-level defense because this Duke team certainly will. Duke is one of the best defensive teams in the nation. It's just offensively they struggle a lot. So if UNC wants a chance to keep this one close, they really got to show up on defense and try and limit how much Duke gets in transition. Another game that I'm really looking forward to on this Saturday slate is that Illinois and Michigan State game. This is just going to be a game with a team that is sliding pretty hard recently versus one of the best teams in the nation as of recently. I think this is just a really, really tough spot for Sparty. They really need to pull this one off, but Illinois is playing as good as anyone in the nation right now and probably had the most impressive past 2 weeks of college basketball compared to anyone in the nation. But yeah, after Michigan State dropped that really tough one last night to Minnesota, they really need to have a strong bounce back here and really need to get a W here, I believe. But I'll really be looking forward to this one, especially the matchup between Wagler and Fears. I just hope that Fears can figure out a way to keep his hands to himself in this one and is able to play the entire time. Next up, I have Texas A&M versus Florida. This is one that we have already talked about a little bit here, but I wanted to get eyes on this game again. A&M is a team that I kind of talked pretty highly on last Sunday, but as I mentioned earlier, is a team that I kind of have to temper my expectations on a little bit. They dropped a really tough one to Bama, and I thought that was a really impressive effort from them, but it's still a loss, so it's not much to hang your hat on. It was a really competitive game, but coming out of there with anything other than a W, I think was certainly a letdown for the Aggies here, especially due to them feeling a little disrespected by the AP polls here recently. And I really don't like the Aggies' chances of getting a win here either this weekend. I think Florida just creates way too many matchup issues for A&M, and Florida is a team that I've talked really highly on all year, and a team that I think is probably a top 10 team in the nation. So I really think Florida is going to continue their dominance here. And like I said, they just create a lot of mismatches for this A&M team. But I really just want to see A&M stay competitive. If they can stay competitive, I won't temper my expectations on them too much. I still think that they're a tournament team and can certainly at least win one game in March. But as far as me saying that they're a Sweet 16 team, I think we need to temper those expectations a little bit. If they want to be considered an elite team, they at least need to keep this one close. The close loss to Alabama was just unfortunately not enough, but they can rectify that with a win against Florida. That would be a huge win for the Aggies and probably would propel them to a top 25 ranking. The last game I have circled for this weekend is that Houston and BYU game. This is just another great matchup out in the Big 12, which seems like we're getting at least one of those every week here. But BYU, as I mentioned, has just really slid recently and really cannot afford a fourth loss in a row. However, Houston is one of the best teams in the nation, and it will be very tough for the Cougars to come in and beat this Houston team. I really like this Houston team. I am always high on Houston teams. I am personally a huge fan of Kelvin Sampson. I think he is probably a top 3 coach in the nation, possibly even considered the best coach in the nation. And they're usually not known for offense at all. Usually their offense is really abysmal. But adding this Flemings kid to this team has done wonders for Sampson and his team. They have really added a lot of scoring with him, and I think that they are a much more sound offensive team with him on the team. But it'll just be cool to see 2 of the best freshmen face off against each other again. As I noted, they're both different positions, so it's not necessarily going to be a matchup between them going back and forth, but it'll be really fun to watch 2 of the best freshmen in the nation face off against each other offensively, and BYU really needs to pull this one off. If they lose this one, they could potentially drop completely off of the AP poll next week. So this is a really big game to watch this weekend, and it's going to have some pretty big implications on seeding. But that's all for today's episode. I'm looking forward to a really loaded weekend of college basketball coming up here, but I appreciate anyone and everyone who listened along to this week's episode. If you enjoyed, go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, and join us back on Sundays and Thursdays for new episodes.